Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for joining our webinar this morning. With us, I'd like to introduce James West, sales engineer from PHD Virtual, who will be joining me with this webinar. And a couple of quick notes. For those of you who may not have attended a webinar with us in the past, the audio is muted for all attendees, so you have a panel on the right-hand side of your screen, hopefully. You should be able to ask any questions. You can answer all questions there through the raise hands. We do take questions throughout the webinar, so please don't hesitate. And without further ado, we will kick this off. So I introduced myself. My name is James Price. I'm with Pentasys Corporation. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect for the Americas. And as I said, I've got James West here with me from PHD Virtual. We're going to be talking today about Citrix XenApp and XenDesktop. First, we're going to talk a little bit about desktop transformation methodology. We're going to walk through some considerations, things you want to look out for. A lot of it's based on experience from both the folks at PHD Virtual as well as from Pentasys and our field experience with clients. Then a summary and then some Q&A. And as I said, please, we encourage everyone to ask questions throughout the presentation. We know this is both a lot of material and some technical stuff, but we try to have a good time with it and keep it informative for everyone. Without further ado, we'll jump right in. So desktop transformation, well, what are we talking about here? Well, desktop transformation is really about the paradigm shift as well as the technological shift in moving from a kind of a device-centric object and software-centric model in desktop environments to really a people-centric, application service-centric architecture, right? So it's a lot of fancy words, but really what we're talking about is taking a desktop from being focused at the actual endpoint device itself, being focused on the people and focused on the services that we're delivering from the data center and moving that into a centrally delivered, optimally managed environment, right? So when we do that, we're taking all of these applications and the endpoint technologies that we've had in a traditional or legacy architecture and transforming that into a new next-generation virtualized delivery mechanism. So what are the key components of desktop transformation? Well, clearly one of the most important things is to identify business priorities. No two businesses are alike. So one of the most important things is to really identify what's important for your business, and to be able to architect a plan that drives business value. And that really feeds to the second component, which is establishing time to value, right? Time to value is really just a fancy way of talking about return on investment, right? It's about scoring the big wins, the things, and addressing the key pain points early in your project, early in the project life cycle, right? You want to identify those things where new technology like desktop transformation has the opportunity to be a game changer for the business, and grab those first. Last but not least, defining a technology roadmap, right? One of the keys to success in any project, but absolutely inside of a desktop transformation project, is establishing a technology roadmap. You have to know where you're going in order to be able to get there, right? There's a lot of great technology out there, a lot of options when you go forward and you're delivering these projects, but the key is to think through and plan out what you're going to do and do it in a methodical way so that, number one, you can keep to a timetable, you can keep it in budget, and that you can actually deliver on those things that you go back to from the where we started in identifying those business priorities and establishing that time to value. That technology roadmap is really what makes sure that you keep it on track. So, simple migration plan, right? Everything in this business should be simple. First thing you do, you set up the components of XenDesktop, your delivery controllers, the virtualization infrastructure. What's beautiful about that is that the virtualization infrastructure really is driven by what's right for your organization. That virtualization infrastructure could be VMware, and vSphere. It could be Citrix XenServer. It could be Microsoft Hyper-V. Any of these are supported, and really the decision there is what's right for your organization. Then we come into setting up the rest of the virtualization components around the delivery controllers and web interfaces and things like that. Then you prepare your desktops, right? This is where we go and you've surveyed the environment. We understand what applications. We've made a decision on what the consolidated desktop operating system is going to be, and then we build that master desktop. Part of that process is the creation of what's called a golden master. So for anyone who's been or worked in perhaps enterprise desktop management, you're familiar with tools like Acronis as well as Altiris and some others. Well, Citrix Provisioning Services was actually an acquisition of a company and delivers that same type of enterprise desktop delivery management. And we create this virtualized disk from which that golden master from which we're going to deliver all these other desktops. Now, one of the other things that's great about the Citrix XenDesktop solution is we have the ability to deliver physical desktops side by side with virtual desktops. And I'll go into that a little bit more on one of the next slides. So you see here in this graphic is kind of how we bring all of these components into that infrastructure. And now we deliver that desktop, right? Delivering it over the LAN, delivering it over the WAN. That's key because not all of our users are going to be in the building where the data center is. In fact, it's becoming more and more common that the data center is not actually located in any of the offices. So technically, we're looking at situations where we're delivering more and more commonly all WAN-based desktops. That sounded like a good plan, right? Not so much. It's virtually impossible to do anything as complex as that into the data center and deliver it. In reality, you're going to make a plan for your organization that's going to reflect the nuances and uniquenesses of your organization. A lot more complicated, a lot more work, but the end result is actually what you want and what you're shooting for, right? First thing is you're going to go out and you're going to assess the requirements of the environment. Understand that you've got different types of users that have different needs because they're in different business units. The folks that are in accounting have different needs than the folks who are in marketing. The folks that are in the shipping and receiving department or the mail room have different needs than the folks that are in operations, right? So it's really important to assess the requirements of your various environments and your various user groups to ensure that as you're crafting a plan and you're planning for desktops and planning on how you're going to deliver those desktops, that we're delivering the right kind of desktop with the right components, the right applications, and the right tools that they need to do their job. Then we're going to sit down based on that information, and you're going to design and architect it. One of the biggest things in the design and architecture portion is decoupling logical layers, right? And that's where you really start to flesh out what a migration plan is going to look like. And when I talk about decoupling the logical layers, what I'm really talking about here is splitting off how we traditionally think of a desktop model as more of a monolithic effort, and really it becomes a decoupled, stacked, layered kind of effect, where we have user profile, user personalization data, things like their desktop settings, documents on their desktops, shortcuts, favorites, things like that. Applications, right? Applications could be things like Microsoft Office. It could be financial applications, things like Great Plains, Navision, Oracle Financials, things like that. And then your underlying operating systems. Well, it's great, and we all want to have a modern operating system like Windows 7, perhaps Windows 8 moving forward. We also still live in the environment where not all applications are compliant with that, right? So there may be situations where we have to deal with legacy operating systems in order to compensate and allow for application compatibility. Testing, verifying the design and testing the migration. Can't emphasize testing enough. One of the biggest things with doing any kind of a project like this is to do a pilot, right? So where you do a deployment and you're testing not just how exactly you're going to migrate the data by migrating a subset of the user base and testing the infrastructure, but that actually really gives you an opportunity to get feedback from the community, from the people that we're serving in the user base, to understand, are these new desktops, do they function? I mean, they work great for IT, but do they really function for the folks that are in accounting? Do the way that the different applications integrate with the desktop, particularly if you've changed from one generation of operating system or one generation of an application to another, that can have a significant impact on the user community. Excuse me, on the user community. So testing and going through that is really key. So you roll out, pilot, and then production, right? It's always about testing to ensure that what you're delivering is going to meet the need and verifying that against your plan. Choose what is right, not what is easy. Well, it's a great quote from Star Wars. I have to say, having done hundreds of these projects, there's probably no truer words have been written and spoken by a character, and it's very true. It's easy to fall into that position where you look at your organization, you want to do that simple plan, right? We're just gonna build new desktops and we're gonna put apps on them, and we're just gonna cut people over and be done with this thing, right? It's fast, it's easy. But is that really right for your organization? That's what you have to ask. And in every scenario I've ever worked in with every client across the country and around the world, it's almost never been that way. You know, choosing what's right for the organization, even though it takes longer, it's oftentimes quite a bit more work, requires a lot more planning, is always what's right. So, the Citrix VDI architecture, be not afraid. It's a complex graphic, lots of servers, lots of arrow, data flying back and forth all over the place. I love this graphic because it scares people a little bit. And it really shouldn't scare you, but it is important to understand that in delivering VDI infrastructure, it is somewhat complex, which is why we focus so much on planning and on testing so that you understand and that we ensure that what we deliver is the highest quality product available to the end user, right? So if we're taking someone who maybe has been at a company for 5 or 7 years, they've been using Windows XP and Office 2003 or Office 2007, and they walk in one morning and we've flipped them Windows 7 with Office 2010, there's a big shock there. There's an impact. There's an impact to productivity. So a certain amount of thought is important in your plan and understanding the cultural changes that doing a VDI project may have on your organization. It's not merely a technological shift, but there are some work style shifting and some culture changes that go along with that. And so while we, from a technical perspective, we look at these drawings and these graphics, and we're like, man, we've got this nailed. You know, we know how to build the infrastructure. We know how to deliver it. It's always important to step back and look at it from the user's perspective. So what are the considerations? So we've broken this out into 5 sections, and we're going to walk through each one of these as we go along. Application delivery, the desktop model and choosing the right model, host resources, some thoughts about planning and understanding what types of resources that you need at the actual hypervisor and the physical infrastructure layer, network resources, how projects like VDI impact network resources. It's a big topic, a lot of things to talk about there. And then access methodology. You know, we built this great, beautiful, shiny data center in the sky, but if we can't get people to it in a simple, reliable fashion, really it's all for naught. So understanding how and planning how we're going to get folks into this data center model is actually very important. So first thing up, application delivery. So what are the use cases, right? So this goes back to, I think the second or third slide where we talked about planning, right, and understanding the environment, doing assessments, understanding how people use applications, because that's really key. Some applications are delivered very effectively in XenDesktop, in a virtual desktop itself. Some applications aren't needed by everyone in the organization, right? There may be applications that require audit controls and things like that. Very limited use applications. Think of things like financial applications, things like that, that everybody doesn't need to have access to. So there are reasons that we may choose to deliver them. Understanding what those use cases are, right, is really one of the big keys in developing a successful XenApp and XenDesktop delivery plan, right, and figuring out how you're going to do them. So I'm going to talk about a couple of use cases for each. So XenApp. XenApp's a classic product. I would venture a guess that almost everyone here has used it in one form or fashion. It's been around for close to 20 years now. And it's one of the most venerable applications in the industry, right? Delivering that application seamlessly to a desktop is great and is best suited for doing situations where you have limited use applications or only for subsets, right? So in the example I talked about earlier, one of the best uses of one of the most common applications to deliver is XenApp are financial applications, things like Great Plains, Oracle Financials, SAP, Clarify, Siebel, things like that, where you need highly controlled, oftentimes audited. One of the more common uses is in like pharmaceutical and things like that, where you have very, very stringent change control environments and things like that. XenApp is far and away, not only do we have years and years of experience with it, but it's a great way to deliver those applications. Small footprint, highly controlled, guaranteed delivery, and it gives you that flexibility to give it just to the people that you need without having to manage, a number of images, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. XenDesktop. XenDesktop is a core delivery model where you're taking and delivering, instead of like with XenApp where I'm delivering just an application to a user, now I'm going to deliver a whole desktop environment, right? And I may be delivering that on a mobile device, like an iPad or an Android tablet. I may be delivering it on a thin client, or I might be repurposing a desktop and just overlaying it on top of a full OS on an existing hardware platform, right? But what the user experience is a full desktop environment with whatever base applications and things that we built and designed based on our assessment going into that. Now, that's great, and that's really the basis, your kind of building block is that XenDesktop. And then you look at, well, everybody in the company needs Office. Everyone in the company needs Internet Explorer, right, or Chrome or something like that, right? Does everyone need to have Navision? Probably not. I have Adobe Reader in the image because everyone reads PDFs online, locally, and things like that. But does everyone need to create them, right? The full version of Adobe has significant licensing costs associated with it. So maybe I deliver Navision and Adobe via XenApp into my XenDesktop. That way I get the right mix of applications in the environment for the user based on that assessment, right? So now what we're really seeing is a combined XenApp and XenDesktop delivery model. Any questions? Okay. Desktop models. This is a very busy slide, and it's kind of a lot to take in for those of you who may not be as familiar with desktop virtualization and the various models, right? So existing and physical are fairly similar, so I'm going to talk about these two together, right? So no, wait a minute, we're talking about desktop virtualization. So why would we be talking about physical or existing desktops, right? Well, the reason is as I kind of hinted at a little earlier, not everything is ideally suited for delivering in a virtual desktop, right? Things that require very, very high GPU performance, floating point performance, things like that, are typically things that involve like 3D rendering, graphics programming. Think about engineering, where you're using 3D wireframe models and things like that. Not really well suited to be in a fully virtualized desktop, because you're not going to get that full GPU performance that you're going to get on a high-end workstation, right? So in that environment, using either using an existing or creating a physical PC blades environment allows you to use a unified, coherent delivery model and actually deliver it off of a physical platform that meets the requirements that you need for the performance and the specialized task areas, right? Pooled and dedicated are similar. Essentially, with pooled and dedicated virtual machines, these are virtual machines that you have for kind of specialized use. One of the most common uses here is you have senior executives, senior managers, things like that, that have custom configurations. Sometimes another common place to use this is in labs, like scientific labs, where you have scientists that work with specialized applications, or you have applications that have fairly complex or nuanced application level configurations that would be difficult to pull into kind of a shared or streamed type of model and capture that into the user personalization space from a layering and segmentation perspective. The last model is streamed. And streamed is far and away the most common. The advantage to streamed is that it's one of the most efficient from a resource consumption perspective. And by that I mean one of the biggest challenges in the early days of desktop virtualization compared with server virtualization was managing the cost aspect, right? As in server virtualization, desktop virtualization, the disks typically rely on a SAN, right? SAN space is an order of magnitude more costly than conventional locally attached storage. So the streamed VM, you have the ability, you have this golden master image. So you don't have, if you've got 1,000 desktops, you don't have 1,000 40 gig virtual hard drives laying out, burning up space on your fabric. Instead, what you have is one, and that read-only image is streamed out 1,000 times. So it's very space and resource effective. The other advantage is it's very high performance. When I say high performance, I mean you get great performance from a power user, from a mid-level, from a basic user perspective, very quick load on times, the ability to merge your desktop for that read-only image, your application delivery, and your user personalization data. Typically, the entire fully assembled stream desktop is delivered to a user in 30 to 45 seconds. Okay, we've got a question here. Can you stream a desktop to a Road Warrior or a tablet? Yes, great question. There are a couple of ways to do this. One is you can actually use what we call a client-side hypervisor, where you actually, the base operating system of the mobile device actually contains a hypervisor, and then you stream down like a local copy of that, and it executes locally. And then it synchronizes it, so that allows you to have that offline use. The most common example is, you know, I'm a road warrior. I have an office in New York, and we also have an office in Palo Alto. So I fly out to Palo Alto, you know, a couple of times a month, right? Well, that's a pretty long flight. It's about 5.5 hours. So I don't want to lose 5.5 hours of work time. That's time I should be doing email and doing other things, right? So having that offline capability with that virtual machine allows me to work while I'm on that flight, right? Now, the other model is just traditional streaming to it. So I have an iPad, right? So I get up from my desk, and I walk down to the conference room. As I get out of my chair, I grab my iPad, and I take it with me. I hit the Citrix receiver. I touch the icon for my desktop, and now suddenly my desktop jumps from my desktop onto my iPad, and it's streamed to me seamlessly as I walk down the hall and into the conference room or the boardroom. Right, and that works equally well when I'm off campus over, 3G and 4G and things like that. Any other questions? Okay.
Hey, James, there's
one
question that just came in here, if I can interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you separate the user's data, for example, IE favorites, and look at the feel of the desktop via XenApp?
How do you separate the user's data between what?
For example, the IE favorites, the look and feel of the desktop via XenApp.
Okay, so we have a part of the XenDesktop architecture includes a service-based application called User Profile Manager. And User Profile Manager works in conjunction with group policy natively within Active Directory and really allows you to capture that, what we call that user personalization data. That's, all the things like their favorites or shortcuts, documents, things like that along the way. That it's all that user data that you're talking about there. Now, what's great about that is that UPM is asynchronous, so it doesn't slow down your users. It also is a great tool and works in conjunction with some other third-party tools to allow you to migrate existing user profiles, right? So say you're not working today in an environment where you have roaming profiles or redirected folders, things like that. It actually can help you migrate them into that type of an architecture for delivery in a XenApp and desktop-based environment. The other thing is it runs in the background. So unlike, for those of you that have worked with roaming folders and redirected folders and stuff in the past, where you have kind of a last writer win problem, where if a user logs in one place, logs in another place, makes a bunch of changes, saves and logs out, and then goes back to the first place and logs out there, that last writer wins kind of effect. One of the advantages to profile management in a XenApp and XenDesktop environment is that it synchronously matches these, so that a user that may be working on an application that's being delivered, say, via a XenApp, and is working on a XenDesktop, those profiles are being synchronized, so that user personalization data, that user data, is being synchronized and presented to both of their sessions, if you will, at the same time. Other questions? That was a really good question, by the way. Okay, on to host resources. Host resources is key, right? We've all worked with server virtualization for a number of years now, and there's a lot of planning tools, and folks generally have a broad amount of experience with planning for servers. Planning for desktops is similar, but it's not exactly the same. And one of the biggest things has come with the advent of things like GPUs. So now earlier we talked about how there are just some applications that still don't, today necessarily perform that well in a fully virtualized environment. Being able to use GPUs, physical GPUs in a virtual desktop, really has come a long way in bringing most applications to be able to be used in a virtualized environment, right? To be able to deliver a PowerPoint presentation with, cool transitions and, all that kind of stuff. Things like that where you need that GPU in that real-time mode to be able to make that be seamless like a user would be accustomed to on a conventional PC. Server resources. I have 1,000 desktops, right? I'm going to virtualize them all, so I need 1,000 CPUs, right? No. A couple of reasons there that it doesn't work that way. Number one, the principal value of virtualization is economies of scale, right? And that still holds true in VDI as much as it does in servers. The other thing is that server CPUs architecturally are significantly different than workstation-based CPUs. A modern Core i7 workstation CPU still isn't nearly as powerful as your Westmere and Nehalem series and Opterons from Intel and AMD on the server side. You're going to get a lot more bang for your buck. The other thing is obviously server-side CPUs architecturally are designed to support many more cores than workstation CPUs. So the same number of sockets and core ratios that you get on the server side are going to be significantly greater. The other thing is virtualization of a vCPU in the workstation and a vCPU in the server. Similar rules apply for oversubscription. Memory resources, NUMA, ranks, and DEMS. The biggest thing to bear in mind here is while you have economies of scale and memory footprint for virtual desktops, just like you do on the server side of things, it's important to understand that the actual memory optimization at the physical layer inside your host is actually very, very important. And the reason I say that is not that it's not important for your servers, it is. But you're going to have an order of magnitude more virtual desktops than you are going to have servers. If you look at a company and a company has 25 servers, they probably have several hundred users, right? So you're looking at 6 to 8 times, sometimes as many as 10 times more virtual desktops than you have servers. So when you look at the impact of that memory consumption, right, your consumptive overhead of memory, that now suddenly, when you look at the physical design and optimization of memory in your host, becomes quite a bit more important. So one of the biggest things here is know your hardware. Talk to your vendor. Make sure that the memory configuration that you're getting in your host is actually fully optimized and populated appropriately. One of the most common things that we see is where not all the channels are fully populated, which causes the server memory to clock down. And you don't even realize it. You think you've got a server that's running at 1333, only to find out it's running at 1066 because not all the channels are populated and they can't run at full speed. Network resources, to bond or not to bond. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide, but the teaser here is it's all about bandwidth, and it's also all about redundancy and failover and the ability to ensure that if you have some form of disruption in your network, which it happens, even in the best of networks, things fail, that you don't, we minimize the impact, if you will, to the environment. The other thing is bad network distribution. Just because you have a gigabit link doesn't mean that it's a good idea to plan around being able to run it at 90%, right? The ability to distribute your traffic effectively through your network is a key consideration in the design, and that design permeates all the way through to the NIC architecture and the bonding and teaming, if you will, within your virtual host. Storage resources, spindles, runs, and ports, oh my. For those of you who are big storage guys, I'm right there with you. Love storage, and it's also one of the most underserved and misunderstood parts of virtualization. Storage is key to delivering VDI, even more so than it is in delivering virtual servers. The reason is an email comes in, and it takes an extra couple of seconds to be processed through Exchange, through the routing engine, to the store driver, and ultimately into the mailbox. Nobody's going to notice. If you open a Word document and you go to start typing, and I'm not a super fast typist, I'd have never made it as a legal secretary, but if you're typing 45 words a minute, and there's about a 3-second lag in seeing the characters show up on the screen, that's not good. And nobody's going to be happy with that. Storage is one of those things where it's got to be real time, almost as much as the network. And it's very key understanding that you have the correct LUN layout, that the actual LUN design underneath it, and the fabric connectivity to the host, the connectivity and how you use it with the provisioning servers and with the design and the delivery of the master images back to the desktops or other stream applications or desktops as you may have used it. All of those things come back to two things: network and storage. Understanding them, planning for them, planning them adequately with the amount of redundancy and resiliency that you need is absolutely critical in your planning for your host resources. Let me back up. So any questions about that? I got one here. Should you have a backup of the golden image or master? Yes. Yes. I mean, when it comes to backup, I mean that's a pervasive topic, and I can think of nobody better to talk about that than my colleague James. But in short, so as to not steal his thunder later, yes. Backing up in a virtual environment is every bit as important as backing up in a conventional non-virtualized environment. Having a backup of the golden masters is always a good idea. Now, there's a number of technologies that's built into the streaming functionality with provisioning services that allow you to create live versions, do merges and segments and things like that. And that stuff is great. It's fabulous. However, for my money, if something happened in the data center or something happened to that, yes, I have multiple provisioning servers. Yes, I have global server load balancing in multiple data centers that are geographically dispersed. Nothing makes me sleep better at night than knowing I got a good backup. Okay, on the network resources. Switch topology, layer 2. So as I talked about a little bit in the last slide, right? Switching in your network is key. Virtual desktops are real-time computing, much more so than servers. The tolerance and the ability to see and its impact on the user for even the slightest amount of latency is unparalleled in pretty much any other technology that we've worked with in the data center in years, right? And this goes back to old school switch topology, your layer 2 design, ensuring that you have core switching, distribution switching, and access switching at layer 2 that is correctly designed and going to support your goals, right? Well, the next thing is switching capacity. And this is one of those things that goes with one of the other ones when we talk a little bit about storage. Is when I talk about switch capacity, most people immediately jump to throughput, right? Megabytes per second. I have 1 gig, I've got 10 gig uplinks, I've got ether channels, I've got all this stuff. I can handle so many gigabits, megabits of traffic, and that's great. I mean, that's important. But the reality is, a given desktop typically is going to be under a meg to a meg and a half if you've got a real heavy power user. Meg and a half a second. That's nothing. Most everyone today, I think I read a study from IDC that said more than 50% of businesses have gigabit to the desktop now. Right? So if you're using 1% of that to deliver your highest end desktop environment, right, throughput, strictly speaking, in megabytes or gigabytes per second really isn't the issue. What will break your back with virtualization on the desktop layer, and the thing that you really have to look at and understand is your packet forwarding, your packet switching rates, your packets per second. And this is where, from the field side of things, I can tell you that one of the most common problems that we see in deployments is that the switching environment just simply doesn't have the horsepower, the packet per second rate to be able to keep up. And that's actually one of the first things that will cause that common thing we've all seen with XenApp or XenDesktop, or any remoting technology where you've got that latency there. I'm type in, okay, and there are my words, right? That's a classic sign where your switching layer just isn't able to keep up. Routing topology, right? When you had 100 desktops and 5 servers, you could get away with having a single subnet, right? May not have been perfect, but it didn't really matter that much. When you get into thousands of desktops, tens to hundreds of servers, various network segments, off-campus, off-LAN, all these other connectivity models, having the proper subnet design and routing topology is key. Things that you have to be very careful about, right? You don't ever want to have, for those of you who use iSCSI, which is one of the most common in delivering VDI technology today, side by side with Fiber Channel, you never want to have storage links that are routed. I say that, everybody says, oh, we would never do that. You'd be surprised the number of times that I see that. Right? You have boxes that are multi-home, and the gateway priorities aren't checked correctly. Things like that. Little things like that when it comes to delivering your virtual desktops are key. Right? Understanding your topology at layer 2 and at layer 3. WAN design, redundant links and load balancing. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in a couple of slides. But the most important thing to understand here is virtual desktops are the best things in peanut butter and jelly, unless, of course, you're allergic to peanut butter. Jelly sandwiches, always a winner, right? As soon as you start using them, people want more. Remote applications, they want more, right? So now where WAN connectivity used to be looked at as, is that really enough is that enough internet connectivity? Is that enough bandwidth for everyone to surf the web and get our mail and run our website? Well, now the single largest consumer of your WAN is going to be virtual desktops, right, and virtual applications. So understanding your WAN design with redundant links and load balancing, things like that, is very critical when you're looking at your network resources. Access methodology, right? This is that bar that kind of runs vertically from top to bottom. Access methodology is key because, again, this goes back to that idea where we build this beautiful, shiny new data center in the cloud, right? We've talked about it. We've spent all this money, all these man hours and research and things have gone into it. How do you get to it? You know, it's in the cloud. Can't really see it. I know it's there. I can't really touch it. I can't go downstairs to the old data center and not necessarily. It's in the ether, right? How we plan to get folks access to it internally and externally is critical. You can have, you know, a lot of different ways, but the key to a successful rollout is to keep it simple, right? Single pathing for users both internally and externally. At the end of the day, CEO goes home with his iPad. He wants to get on his desktop. He wants to check his mail. He doesn't want to have to remember that there's a different URL when he's at home or when he's in the office. When you roam from the 7th floor to the 3rd floor, you know, and the 3rd floor is where the Starbucks and stuff is at, right? And now you're on public Wi-Fi. You don't want to have to lose connectivity to your desktop. That should flow seamlessly, right? So that really comes down to thinking through and planning that access methodology for how you're going to do that. Load balancers. Load balancers are key, right? Like everything in a redundant architecture, you know, we can have multiple web interfaces, we can have multiple controllers, we can have all of that. But if we don't have the proper load balancing design to ensure seamless failover, it doesn't matter if it's off or not. If your entry point is only pointed at one of them, and of course, Murphy's Law, that'll be the one that goes down, right? The fact that you have a redundant controller doesn't do you any good. So planning and having the proper load balancing and redundancy in place is key. SSL VPN. So we have all this stuff that's secured. It's secured by certificates, all that. Well, why do we need SSL VPN? That's almost kind of legacy. Well, you have to know. The reality is that there are some applications that can be delivered via SSL VPN. Great technology. It's easy to use. There are other things where you may require a higher degree of security, right? Some applications truly are of a nature of criticality and sensitivity that they require that. So having that functionality in your access methodology is a key consideration. Any questions about that? All right. So XenDesktop, one kick butt way to deliver desktop virtualization, right? And with that, I'm going to turn over to my colleague, James West at PHD Virtual.
Thanks, James. All right, what I want to do for the next couple of minutes here is quickly review what James touched upon earlier, but then go through monitoring XenDesktop or XenApp. So if you have it in place or you're looking to have it in place, and from a monitoring perspective, what exactly do you want to monitor and how do you want to monitor it? Just to recap the points that James touched on, again, the first two bullet points here are kind of go hand in hand, right? So when you're in the planning stages of what you want to offer the business or your end users, you want to start from the top and deploy from the bottom up, right? So you'll sit down, plan exactly what you want to offer the business, your end users, and what tools you want to provide for them to be able to be productive at their job, right? And then from there, once you identify what those goals are, you'll build out a solution to meet those goals, right? And then you'll plan it, evaluate it, validate it, and then go ahead and roll it out in production. Right? And then lastly, you touched on, you don't want to forget about the network. So if you have any hidden inefficiencies with the network that aren't known yet, once you begin to roll out XenApp or XenDesktop, those will, at that point, come to the surface. So ultimately, you want to avoid coming to that point, and you want to consider the network as part of your planning and deployment phases. So I'm sure some of you that have XenApp or XenDesktop in place already, some of these points might look pretty familiar, but if you're looking to roll it out at some point in the future, you want to keep these areas in the back of your mind, right? So one of the worst things from an admin or an engineer perspective is discovering problems too late. Right? You don't want that phone call from end users saying, hey, my desktop's performing slow, or I can't access the applications. Right? You want to be notified about that before they're calling you at that point. Right? So you want to avoid that at all costs. And then on top of that, when things do go wrong, things aren't performing well, how do you pinpoint exactly what is causing that interruption in service? Right? Root cause analysis. And on top of that, when you are trying to determine what the root cause is, you don't want to waste time looking at areas of the environment that aren't actually relevant to what's producing the interruption in service. Right? So you want the information that can help you quickly pinpoint where the bottleneck may be, and then on top of that, being able to remediate in a timely manner. And then lastly, there are some challenges around deploying monitoring solutions. Some can do certain things very well, they have weaknesses in other areas, right? So you want to get it right the first time. Picking the right solution that's going to give you the information that you need to properly offer a efficiently running XenDesktop or XenApp implementation. So ultimately, what does PHD Virtual Monitor provide at a high level? So again, being able to provide the evidence to determine root cause. So when things go wrong, things aren't performing well, we can give you the information relevant to determining what exactly is causing what you're experiencing for your end users. And on top of that, once you identify the root cause, being able to resolve or correct that event of failure in the environment as soon as possible. You don't want to have your end users not being productive, not doing their job for hours, if not days, because you can't figure out what exactly is the failure in the environment, right? And then lastly here, giving you an interface, a single management interface to quickly give you the health of the environment. What's performing well, what isn't, what could be performing better, right? So all these different areas here, PHD Virtual Monitor can provide you with to completely handle the environment as it performs and runs. So if we take a step back and look at the PHD Virtual Monitor solution as far as the scope goes, to help you navigate what we're getting across here is you'll have PHD Virtual Monitor deployed at your main data center. Right? It's monitoring the infrastructure. And if you look there in the bottom, so this can be within the LAN or across the WAN, we can monitor these various assets or resources of the infrastructure. Right? So starting with the virtual environment, this could be VMware, it could be Xen Server, it can be Hyper-V. We can monitor all of those hypervisor platforms. And then on top of that, you go to your physical servers, Windows, Linux. You can monitor the operating system, you can monitor the hardware. And on top of that, they have applications running. They could be databases. Again, without going through all these points, you can see the breadth of the solution is very wide-ranging. It's safe to say that pretty much any asset or resource in the infrastructure that's on the network can be monitored through PHD Virtual Monitor. Now, another thing to take away from this is you'll see a blue bar that runs across the middle there. SMP, sysflow, API integration, etc. So not only is it flexible in the fact that it can monitor the entire infrastructure, but it's also flexible in the fact that it provides multiple ways in which you can monitor those different assets, right, through SMP, sysflow, and so on. So we can do agentless type monitoring or remote monitoring, as well as agent-based monitoring. And in most situations, you're going to want to use both, right? Because hypervisor monitoring gives you the tools to make sure your resources at the host level are performing well and not being overtaxed. Again, you will need to know information at the application level, right, to ensure the applications are available and they're performing well. So that's the case in which you'd want to deploy an agent giving you that additional information for your application. And then from an access standpoint, how you get the actual information that's being collected and then presented by PHD Virtual Monitor. There's a couple of different ways in which you can do so. Natively, the console is web-based, but on top of that, we do provide plugins for XenCenter, also for the vSphere client. So you can manage and monitor the environment all from one interface, not having to jump back and forth across consoles, which can be sometimes time-consuming. Then also, if you have a solution in place or enterprise management portal, you can take the information being collected by them and pipe it up into the other solutions to give you one single view for the entire environment. Again, very flexible from a monitoring perspective, and how you want to monitor it, and then also how you get to the actual data being collected from the solution. So when we focus on XenDesktop and XenApp monitoring, what exactly should you be monitoring? And sometimes some people fall into the area that they only want to monitor XenApp or XenDesktop, right? But what about the rest of the infrastructure? Your virtual desktops, your hosting platforms, so VMware or Xen server. And what about your storage, your SANs, your NASs, network devices, on through your infrastructure systems, right? Because all these different layers can and will have an impact on the performance or availability of XenDesktop or XenApp. So you want to monitor all these different areas, right? So for example, if you have a network switch go down, it will impact the end user's experience, whether they can get the information or their desktop is performing inadequately. Right? So again, you want to monitor all these different components because they will affect ultimately what the end user is going to experience through XenDesktop or XenApp. So if we break down some of the moving parts of XenDesktop or XenApp, this is a subset of some of the information you may have. So it's not important to take away that you might have some of this, you may have some of these components, you may have all of them, but ultimately what we're getting across here is the reach of PHD Virtual Monitor. On the left, you might have your remote users, your home office users, or branch office who come in through a CAG. It's going to be a NetScaler, it could be both. And then through that, they'll access their desktop or the published apps through XenApp. And on top of that, you have your local endpoints, so your local users coming in from the LAN. Right? They may come in through a web interface or maybe through some type of back client and access their desktops or applications. And with those areas, we can monitor PHD Virtual Monitor. So see that by the actual PHD logo indicates that it can be monitored through the use of the solution. And on top of that, you want to monitor the infrastructure, right? So AD for authentication, SQL to house all the configuration information, and then DHCP providing the network information for your desktops. Right, so all these moving parts of the infrastructure need to be monitored, because they will and can impact the performance, of your implementation. So if we look at those 7 layers, what exactly we can provide you with, this is how it breaks down. Now, this isn't a comprehensive list, but just to give you an idea of what we're capable of providing you with for these different areas. So for storage specifically, how much bandwidth is being utilized, what are the IOPS being experienced from your desktops or your servers, and then at the hypervisor level, whether it's ESX, ESXi, or Xen server, giving you information about the resources provided by your hosts. You don't want to make sure they're being taxed and that they're able to provide the necessary resources to accommodate your desktops or server workloads. Again, if you look at the other areas, you'll see some of this is very useful information. Again, it's going to help you determine root cause, being able to remediate issues quickly, and also being able to be proactive about the environment. So being able to catch things before they have an impact on the end user experience. And if we just take a quick look or zoom in on the specific components of XenDesktop or XenApp, here are some of the specific metrics we can capture for you on top of what we can capture for the 7 layers of the remaining infrastructure. Right? You want to focus more importantly on the HDX or IC information for your desktop experience, so session latency, ICA channel bandwidth, right? And what exactly is the end user experiencing from their point of view? And also, the other areas as well, right? Some very important and useful information that we can provide you with. So again, we touched on what exactly the solution can give you and how it does it, but just to give you a use case of a example of a customer who found immediate value in the product. So they had XenDesktop in place, right, and were constantly experiencing performance issues for the end user experience, right? And at the current time, they were only monitoring CPU and memory resources at hypervisor level, right? And with that, they were seeing that CPU was high and memory was high. So naturally, what they would do is allocate more resources. But in this particular instance, it didn't fix or resolve the poor performance. So at that point, what they did is implemented PHD Virtual Monitor, which at that point could monitor not just CPU memory, but the rest of the environment. And then from that, they were able to quickly determine that a lot of IOPS were hitting a particular data store. So with that, they redistributed some of the desktops across the storage across their LUNs, which alleviated the performance issues they were experiencing for the end users. So again, you want to monitor the entire environment, not just one area, because you don't want to focus your time monitoring something that may not have an impact, and you're chasing your tail, not able to resolve the problem and get your end users back to being productive. And so just to summarize exactly what this solution provides you with, again, it's holistic monitoring of both the virtual and physical space of the environment. Again, not just one or the other, we can do both for you. Again, not to underestimate XenDesktop or XenApp, it does provide some very useful tools, but it can be complex in how you monitor and manage that. We can reduce that complexity and mention of XenDesktop or XenApp. And then also, we do provide enterprise capabilities at a fraction of the cost. So a lot of the enterprise solutions out there come at a very heavy price tag, not with PHD. So again, we hope to hear from you and reach out and get you specific pricing, exactly how that would price out for the environment. And then lastly, it's easy to use. You don't want to have a complex monitoring solution because you will need it when things don't go as they should. Again, we want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. And because of that, we would like to offer a 10% discount on the PHD Virtual Monitor solution, as well as the service offerings from Pentasys. So please do take advantage of that. At the current time, I want to go ahead and open it up for some Q&A. Again, we do hope to hear from you so we can be reached at the information for Pentasys and PHD Virtual. So one question is, how does the PHD Virtual Monitor solution stack up to EdgeSight? And it comes back to that point that you want to monitor not only XenApp or XenDesktop, but the remaining infrastructure. EdgeSight's focus is on XenApp and XenDesktop specifically, but it has no context or visibility beyond that. So it may report that your users are experiencing poor performance for their desktops, but can't exactly tell you why. It can't pinpoint that, hey, it's the storage or it's the network. Right? That's where we come into play, giving you monitoring and visibility at all those various levels. So there's been several questions about how to access the presentation as well as the software. All the information is available on our website at phdvirtual.com. We do offer a trial version which you can download from our website, which is fully featured. So we don't limit any of the features for the trial version. What you trial is what you'll get at the time of purchase. And then also, if you'd like to review this presentation, it would also be available on the PHD website. There's one question around cost. Again, it varies depending upon what you want to monitor, whether it's a hypervisor, whether it's a switch or a router. For more detailed pricing, I'd recommend that you reach out via one of those methods, whether it's phone or email, and we can get you more specific pricing based on how the environment lays out and what exactly you want to monitor. But overall, it is per device or per host. So that device could be a switch, it could be a router, it could be a SAN or NAS, and then we also license per host, and that could be per ESX host or per Xen server host. And then one thing I also want to point out, that Pentasys will be offering a free ROI analysis for those of you who took the time to attend. Then please take advantage of some of these offerings. They will prove to be very useful for you. All right, so at that point, I don't see any more questions. Again, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. We look forward to hearing from you. Again, everyone have a great day, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks and bye.